The silver ships came from the darkness between stars like hunters seeking easy prey. Commander Vexkara stood on the bridge of her massive warship and watched the small blue planet turn slowly in the void. Her four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she read the reports from her scout probes. This world would be another simple conquest for the Zephyrian Empire. The humans below had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. Their fastest ships crawled through space using primitive chemical rockets that would take years to reach their nearest moon. Their weapons were simple metal projectiles fired from crude gunpowder devices. Their cities burned fossil fuels and pumped smoke into their own air like foolish children poisoning themselves. Vexkara clicked her claws against the control panel as she studied the tactical data. The humans had split their single world into hundreds of different nations that constantly fought each other over resources and territory. They could not even unite their own species under one banner, let alone pose a threat to an empire that controlled 40 star systems. Her tactical officer approached with additional intelligence. The humans had detected their probe ships but seemed confused and frightened by what they had seen. Their military forces were scrambling to defensive positions using vehicles that moved on wheels across the ground, like primitive insects. Their leaders were making panicked broadcasts asking for calm, while clearly having no plan to deal with visitors from space. On the planet below, Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood at his observation post in the mountains of Colorado and watched the alien probe streak across the morning sky. The metallic object moved without making any sound, defying everything he knew about flight and physics. It scanned major cities with beams of light that seemed to look through buildings and walls before, vanishing into space as quickly as it had appeared. Within hours, every military base on Earth was buzzing with activity. Soldiers who had been preparing for wars against other humans now faced the reality that something far more advanced was watching them from above. The probe had demonstrated technology that made their best aircraft look like toys made from scrap. Metal Dr. Lisa Grant stood before an emergency meeting of world leaders in a bunker deep beneath the United Nations building. She had spent her career studying the possibility of contact with alien civilizations, but never expected it to happen like this. The probe's scanning pattern suggested a military assessment rather than peaceful exploration. Her voice was steady but grim as she delivered her analysis to the assembled presidents and prime ministers. The alien technology was centuries beyond anything humans had developed. Their materials were stronger, their energy sources more efficient, and their ability to move through space made human rockets look like stone wheels. Whatever civilization had sent the probe could destroy Earth's entire military without breaking stride. President William Hayes sat at the head of the conference table and tried to process what he was hearing. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been trade negotiations and border disputes. Now he was learning that humanity might face extinction from visitors they had never expected and could not hope to fight. The Zephyrian delegation arrived exactly 72 hours after the first probe had been detected. Their massive dreadnought appeared in Earth's orbit without warning, a dark shape 3 miles long that blocked out stars and cast shadows across entire continents. The ship's weapons could be seen even from the ground, enormous arrays of energy cannons that could turn cities to glass. Commander Vexkara's voice reached every communication device on the planet simultaneously, speaking through radio and television and internet connections with technology that bypassed every security system humans had built. Her words were translated instantly into every human language, ensuring that no person on Earth could avoid hearing her ultimatum. She spoke with the casual contempt of a predator addressing prey animals. The humans had been evaluated and found suitable for slavery. Their world contained resources the Empire desired, and their population would serve as workers in Zephyrian mines and factories. Resistance would only result in unnecessary suffering before the inevitable surrender. To demonstrate the futility of fighting back, the transmission included footage from other worlds the Empire had conquered. Entire cities reduced to glowing craters. Populations herded into transport ships like livestock. Proud civilizations erased from history and remembered only as entries in Zephyrian databases. The message was clear. This was not a negotiation but a notification that Earth's independence was ending. The ultimatum gave humanity 7 days to surrender unconditionally. Vexkara explained that this generous timeframe reflected the Empire's policy of minimizing damage to useful resources and populations. Any attempt to resist or evacuate would result in immediate destruction. of major population centers as an example, to other worlds considering defiance. General Patricia Cole watched the alien broadcast from the Pentagon's deepest bunker and felt rage building in her chest. The contempt in the alien commander's voice made it clear that humans were viewed as nothing more than clever animals, to be collected and used. The 7-day deadline was not meant to give Earth time to prepare a defense. It was designed to let fear and despair break human morale before the invasion began. Admiral Kevin Walsh reviewed intelligence reports from around the globe as panic spread through major cities. The alien ships' weapons were beyond anything in human arsenals. Their shields could deflect nuclear missiles like raindrops. Their faster-than-light travel meant they could bring reinforcements from across the galaxy, while human forces remained trapped in one star system. But in a small conference room beneath NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain, a different conversation was taking place. Captain Danny Price sat across from Colonel Amy Brooks and studied classified files that officially did not exist. For decades, certain projects had been developed in absolute secrecy, hidden not just from other nations but from most of their own governments. Price looked up from the documents with the first spark of hope anyone had felt since the aliens arrived. He had been read into programs that pushed the boundaries of known physics, weapons systems that used principles most scientists thought were impossible, and defensive measures that had been built in anticipation of exactly this scenario. Brooks nodded as she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. The aliens thought they were dealing with primitives who burned fossil fuels and fought with gunpowder weapons. They had observed humanity's public face and assumed it represented everything the species was capable of achieving. Their arrogance and contempt might prove to be fatal weaknesses. The countdown to humanity's surrender had begun, but Earth was not as helpless as it appeared. While the world's television cameras showed crowds of terrified humans fleeing major cities, a very different reality was unfolding in the shadows beneath the surface. Deep under Cheyenne Mountain, humanity's most carefully guarded secrets were finally being revealed to the handful of people who needed to know them. Colonel Amy Brooks led Captain Danny Price through corridors that did not appear on any official map. The walls were lined with technologies that would have seemed like magic to most humans, but had been developed over decades by scientists working in absolute secrecy. Projects hidden within projects, funded by budgets that officially did not exist, all preparing for a day that everyone hoped would never come. The first revelation was the transport network. What appeared to be subway tunnels beneath major cities were actually something far more advanced. Quantum displacement corridors that could move people and equipment instantly between any 2 points on Earth. The technology had been tested and refined for 15 years while the public remained completely unaware of its existence. Dr. Lisa Grant stood before a holographic display showing Earth's hidden infrastructure. The satellites that the Zephyrians had dismissed as primitive communication devices were actually weapons platforms, armed with kinetic bombardment systems that could strike any target on the planet or in near orbit. The aliens had seen exactly what they expected to see, and ignored the reality hidden beneath the surface. Price studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. Every major military installation that appeared vulnerable to attack was actually empty, evacuated through the quantum corridors and replaced with sophisticated holographic projections. The terrified crowds fleeing in panic were artificial intelligence constructs designed to convince orbital observers that humanity was in complete chaos. The deception extended far beyond simple camouflage. For 3 years, a program called Project Mirror had been replacing real populations in major cities with holographic duplicates during potential observation periods. The Zephyrians had been watching an elaborate theater performance, believing they were observing genuine human behavior under stress. Lieutenant Jake Morrison found himself assigned to one of the most crucial aspects of the plan. His unit was responsible for maintaining the illusion that human military forces were retreating in disorder while actually moving into carefully prepared positions. Soldiers who appeared to be fleeing were actually deploying advanced equipment that had been hidden in underground bunkers for years. The technology that made the deception possible came from sources that would have shocked the public. Humanity had not been alone in the universe for much longer than most people realized. Previous alien visitors had underestimated Earth's defenses and paid the price, leaving behind wreckage that human scientists had spent decades studying and improving upon. Dr. Susan Carter explained the most critical discovery to the assembled team of military commanders. The Zephyrian shields operated on rotating frequency patterns that created brief windows of vulnerability. Every 47 minutes, the aliens had used the same defensive technology for so long that they had never bothered to randomize the rotation cycles. This weakness would have been impossible to exploit without perfect timing across all human forces. But humanity possessed something the Zephyrians had never encountered before: a communication network that operated faster than light itself. Quantum entanglement arrays hidden within seemingly primitive radio towers could coordinate every action across the entire planet. Simultaneously, President Hayes participated in carefully staged arguments with other world leaders, all designed to convince the Zephyrians that humanity remained divided, even in the face of extinction. The aliens monitored every public communication and saw exactly what they expected: a fractured species incapable of unified action, even when facing annihilation. Meanwhile, the real decisions were being made through quantum-encrypted channels that the Zephyrians could not detect. Every evacuation, every weapons deployment, every aspect of the coming battle was coordinated through networks that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Invisible to alien scanning technology, General Patricia Cole reviewed the deployment of forces that officially did not exist: fighter aircraft that used gravity manipulation instead of jet engines, infantry equipped with personal shields and energy weapons, orbital platforms disguised as space debris but capable of precision strikes anywhere in the solar system. The most sophisticated element of the plan involved human psychology itself. The Zephyrians were a hierarchical species that thought in terms of command and control, unable to comprehend a civilization that could make collective decisions through what appeared to be chaos and argument. They saw human democracy as weakness, rather than recognizing it as the most advanced decision-making system ever developed. Admiral Kevin Walsh coordinated the submarine fleets that carried weapons the Zephyrians had never imagined: fusion torpedoes that could crack continental shelves, electromagnetic pulse generators that could disrupt electronics across entire continents, and most importantly, quantum disruption devices that could interfere with faster-than-light travel. The aliens would discover too late that Earth's oceans hid as many weapons as its skies, and that humanity had learned to use every environment as a battlefield. Underwater bases that had been constructed over decades were coming online, their existence hidden by the simple fact that the Zephyrians had never bothered to scan beneath Earth's water surface. Captain Price found himself amazed by the scope of the preparations. Asteroid mining operations that had been dismissed as scientific research were actually weapons manufacturing facilities. Space telescopes that studied distant stars also served as targeting systems for orbital defense platforms. Even weather monitoring stations contained components for planetary defense systems. The countdown continued while the Zephyrians observed what they believed was a species in terminal panic. Their scout ships reported human governments arguing about surrender terms, military forces abandoning defensive positions, and populations fleeing major cities in complete disorder. Every observation confirmed their expectations and reinforced their contempt for human capabilities. Commander Vexkara reviewed the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The humans were behaving exactly as predicted, their primitive psychology making them incapable of rational response to superior force. Their weapons were laughably inadequate, their defenses non-existent, and their unity fractured by the stress of facing extinction. But deep beneath the surface of Earth, in chambers that did not officially exist, the final preparations were being completed. Weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics were being charged. Soldiers equipped with technologies that seemed like science fiction were moving into position. Communication networks that operated faster than light itself were linking every defender into a single coordinated force. The Zephyrians had made the fatal error of believing their own propaganda. They had convinced themselves that any species that had not developed faster than light travel must be primitive in every way. They had observed Earth's public face and assumed it represented the limits of human achievement. In less than 24 hours, they would discover that humanity's greatest weapon was not any piece of technology, but the ability to appear weak while preparing to strike. The species that had spent thousands of years learning to hunt and survive was about to remind the galaxy why underestimating Earth was always a fatal mistake. The stage was set, the actors were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on humanity's most important performance. The seventh day arrived with the pale light of dawn breaking across a world that appeared ready to surrender. Commander Vex Kara stood on her command bridge and watched as her assault ships descended toward Earth's major cities, their hulls gleaming with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. The invasion force moved in perfect formation, each vessel assigned to specific targets that would demonstrate Zephyrian power to the cowering human populations below. The first wave of alien fighters swept down through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their energy weapons charging as they approached what appeared to be humanity's most important military installations. Vex Kara had ordered a demonstration bombardment to show the humans that resistance was futile before demanding their final surrender. Lieutenant Jake Morrison watched from his hidden position in the Rocky Mountains as the alien craft approached their targets. The military bases spread across the valley below looked exactly like what the Zephyrians expected to find. Concrete bunkers, radar dishes, runways lined with primitive aircraft that used jet engines and carried chemical explosive missiles. Everything appeared vulnerable and defenseless. The first plasma bolts from the alien ships struck the base with devastating effect. Buildings erupted in flames and smoke as the advanced energy weapons tore through what seemed to be humanity's best defenses. Explosions lit up the morning sky as fuel depots detonated, and ammunition bunkers were consumed by alien fire. From orbit, the attack looked exactly like the swift victory the Zephyrian Empire had achieved on 40 other worlds. The primitive human installations crumbled under the assault, their destruction broadcast across the planet to show every human exactly how helpless they truly were against superior technology. But Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the holographic projections play their part to perfection. The burning buildings were empty shells that had been abandoned weeks ago. The exploding aircraft were sophisticated decoys designed to fool orbital sensors. The terrified soldiers running in panic were artificial intelligence constructs programmed to feed the aliens exactly what they expected to. Captain Danny Price spoke into his quantum communicator from a command bunker that existed partially outside normal space-time. His voice reached every human defender simultaneously through networks that operated faster than light itself. The fish had taken the bait exactly as planned, and now it was time to show the Zephyrians what humanity was actually capable of achieving. The first surprise came from what the aliens had dismissed as primitive communication equipment. Satellite dishes that appeared to be simple radio transmitters suddenly reconfigured themselves into railgun artillery. Weather monitoring stations revealed their true nature as targeting systems for weapons that had been hidden in plain sight for decades on underground facilities that the Zephyrians had assumed were subway tunnels open to reveal missile silos containing projectiles that defied everything. The aliens thought they knew about human technology. These were not chemical rockets but weapons that manipulated gravity and space-time itself to achieve impossible velocities and accuracy. Admiral Kevin Walsh coordinated the global counterattack from his mobile headquarters, watching tactical displays that showed alien formations beginning to break apart under fire from weapons that should not have existed. Decades of black-budget development were finally being revealed as humanity dropped its carefully maintained disguise. The kinetic bombardment platforms that had been dismissed as orbital debris suddenly accelerated to combat velocity. Tungsten rods that had appeared to be harmless space junk slammed into Zephyrian assault craft with the force of meteors, their timing coordinated to strike during the precise 2.3-second windows when alien shields were vulnerable. Vex Kara watched her tactical display erupt in damage reports as ships that should have been invulnerable to primitive human weapons crumpled like metal cans under the devastating kinetic strikes. Her voice cracked with the first uncertainty she had felt in decades of conquest as she demanded explanations. From her tactical officers, the second wave of surprises emerged from directions the Zephyrians had never considered. Captain Price launched from an underground facility in his fighter craft, emerging through quantum displacement corridors directly behind enemy formations. This was not one of the crude metal aircraft the aliens had observed and dismissed, but a machine that bent space-time around itself and represented decades of secret development. Human fighters that moved like living things appeared throughout the battle zone, their pilots coordinating through quantum communication networks that allowed them to fight as a single organism. They struck with precision that seemed impossible, their weapons firing at exactly the moments when Zephyrian shields dropped into vulnerability cycles. Dr. Susan, Carter's theoretical breakthrough became devastating reality as human weapons synchronized their attacks across the entire planet. Plasma bolts that should have been deflected easily tore through alien hulls during shield rotation windows. Missiles that appeared primitive overwhelmed Zephyrian point defense systems through coordinated timing that no hierarchical military could have achieved. But the greatest shock came when the fleeing human population stopped running and revealed themselves as the most sophisticated military force the galaxy had ever seen. Citizens who had appeared to be helpless civilians produced advanced personal weapons from quantum storage devices and began fighting with tactics that spoke to years of secret preparation. General Patricia Cole coordinated ground forces that emerged from quantum tunnels behind enemy positions, wielding weapons that fired concentrated gravity wells and electromagnetic pulses. Soldiers who had trained in secret for decades finally revealed capabilities that made Zephyrian infantry look like primitives playing with sticks and stones. The battle turned into a massacre as human technology proved superior to alien systems in every category that mattered. Zephyrian ships found themselves outmaneuvered by craft that could phase in and out of normal spacetime. Their weapons could not lock onto targets that existed partially in quantum dimensions. Their communications were disrupted by jammers that operated on principles their science had never discovered. Morrison led his unit in an assault on a crashed alien transport, his squad moving with tactical precision that spoke to a lifetime of preparation for this moment. They deployed personal shields powered by miniaturized fusion reactors, advanced targeting systems that predicted enemy movement through quantum probability analysis, and weapons that fired projectiles capable of adjusting their trajectory during flight. The Zephyrian ground forces found themselves completely outmatched by opponents they had expected to crush with ease. Human weapons penetrated their armor, human tactics anticipated their every move, and human coordination allowed for battlefield adaptability that their rigid command structure could never match. Vexkara's desperate demands for reinforcements went unanswered, as her fleet found itself systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. The humans moved with the fluid coordination of a species that had spent millennia learning to cooperate, while Zephyrian forces remained trapped in hierarchical thinking that made them predictable and vulnerable. Dr. Lisa Grant's voice cut through every Zephyrian communication system simultaneously as she delivered humanity's response to their ultimatum. The aliens had called humans primitive because they appeared divided, because their governments argued and their people seemed chaotic. But what they had observed was democracy in action, the most sophisticated decision-making system ever developed, allowing 8 billion minds to work in perfect coordination when survival was at stake. The revelation was complete. Earth had never been a helpless world awaiting conquest. It was a fortress that had spent centuries preparing for this moment, populated by a species that had turned paranoia into preparation, and preparation into overwhelming victory. The Zephyrian Empire's most powerful fleet was being destroyed by opponents they had dismissed as primitive animals, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The battle for Earth's skies raged with an intensity that shattered every assumption the Zephyrian Empire had made about human capabilities. What had begun as a routine demonstration of superior force had become the most desperate fight for survival in the history of their civilization. Commander Vexkara's flagship shuddered under concentrated fire from weapons that violated every principle of physics her scientists understood. Her tactical officer's voice was strained with disbelief. As damage reports flooded the command center, the human fighters were using quantum displacement drives that allowed them to phase in and out of normal space-time during combat. Their energy signatures matched Zephyrian shield harmonics with impossible precision, suggesting they had not only studied alien technology, but improved upon it significantly. Vexkara demanded explanations that no one could provide. How could a species that burned fossil fuels and fought with chemical projectiles suddenly demonstrate mastery of quantum mechanics and exotic matter manipulation? The humans were using scientific principles that the Zephyrian Empire had discovered only after centuries of development, yet they wielded these technologies with casual expertise. Captain Danny Price answered her unspoken question as his fighter phased through the flagship's shields during a vulnerability window, his voice cutting through Zephyrian communications with crystal clarity. While the aliens had been building an empire through conquest and domination, Humanity had been building something far more dangerous, a civilization-sized trap designed to catch any predator foolish enough to underestimate. Earth Price's fighter unleashed a concentrated burst of weaponized, dark matter that tore through the dreadnought's hull like tissue paper. The exotic particles had been reverse-engineered from alien wreckage recovered from previous visitors, who had made the same fatal mistake of assuming Earth was defenseless. Each defeat had taught humanity more about galactic technology and how to defeat it. On the planet's surface, General Patricia Cole coordinated a ground offensive that defied every tactical manual the Zephyrians had written. Human soldiers emerged from quantum tunnels behind enemy positions with weapons that fired gravity wells, electromagnetic pulses, and concentrated antimatter streams. Their coordination was flawless, their technology superior, and their motivation absolute. Lieutenant Jake Morrison led his enhanced infantry unit against a Zephyrian landing force that had expected to face primitives armed with gunpowder weapons. Instead, they found themselves confronting soldiers who moved like ghosts, struck like lightning, and fought with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics to their will. Morrison's squad deployed personal shields powered by fusion reactors, small enough to fit in backpacks. Their targeting systems used quantum probability algorithms to predict enemy movement before it happened. Their weapons fired self-guiding projectiles that could change course during flight to strike weak points in alien armor with surgical precision. The Zephyrian ground forces, veterans of 40 successful conquests, found themselves completely outclassed by opponents they had dismissed as barely civilized animals. Human tactics adapted in real time to counter every strategy the aliens attempted. Human weapons penetrated defenses that had never failed before. Human coordination allowed for battlefield responses that hierarchical military structures could never achieve. But the most devastating revelation came from Dr. Lisa Grant's research division. The aliens had been monitoring Earth's communications for months, completely missing humanity's greatest achievement, a planet-wide consciousness network that connected 8 billion minds through quantum entanglement, fields generated by their own neural activity. Grant's voice reached every human defender simultaneously as she explained what the Zephyrians had failed to understand. The arguing governments, the apparent chaos, the seeming inability to unite, all of it was democracy in action, the most sophisticated form of collective intelligence ever developed. Every decision had been made by consensus among billions of minds working together, creating coordination that no centralized command could match. Admiral Kevin Walsh observed the space battle from his quantum command center as Zephyrian fleet. Formations crumbled under attacks that anticipated their every move with impossible accuracy. The aliens thought like conquerors, hierarchical, predictable, efficient within their rigid structures. Humans thought like survivors, adaptable, creative, and absolutely ruthless when cornered. The battle reached its climax when Colonel Amy Brooks activated humanity's ultimate revelation. Every piece of space debris that the Zephyrians had dismissed as the clutter of a primitive civilization suddenly revealed itself as part of a massive orbital defense grid that had been decades in the making. Thousands of hidden weapons platforms opened fire simultaneously, creating a killing field that no ship could survive. Tungsten rod accelerators, gravity well generators, antimatter projectors, and exotic matter cannons turned Earth's orbit into an impenetrable fortress. The space junk that cluttered human orbital space was actually the most sophisticated defense network ever constructed. Vex, Kara watched her empire's most powerful fleet being systematically annihilated by opponents who had seemed helpless just hours before. Her ships were outgunned by weapons that should not have existed, outmaneuvered by craft that moved like living things, and outfought by tactics that defied every principle of military science she understood. The human fighters moved through the battle zone with coordination that seemed telepathic, each pilot knowing exactly where every other defender was positioned without needing direct communication. They struck in perfect synchronization, their attacks timed to exploit shield vulnerabilities that the Zephyrians had never realized existed in their own technology. Price led a formation of advanced fighters in the final assault on the flagship, his squadron moving through space with grace that made alien craft look clumsy and primitive by comparison. These were machines that incorporated the best of human ingenuity, with technologies captured and improved from dozens of previous alien visitors. The fighters used quantum tunneling to appear inside Zephyrian shield perimeters, antimatter weapons to punch through hulls that had withstood planet-cracking bombardments, and coordination algorithms that allowed them to fight as extensions of a single vast intelligence, encompassing the entire human species. Morrison's ground forces coordinated their assault with orbital strikes that demonstrated precision beyond anything the Zephyrians had thought possible. Human weapons platforms could target individual soldiers from orbit without harming nearby allies, using exotic matter beams that passed through solid matter to strike their intended targets with perfect accuracy. The revelation was complete and devastating. Earth was not a primitive world struggling with basic technology. It was the most advanced military fortress in known space, defended by a species that had turned survival into an art form. The Zephyrian Empire had brought their finest fleet to conquer what they thought was easy prey, only to discover they had attacked the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. Vexkara's final transmission was filled with rage, desperation, and grudging respect for opponents who had taught her empire the meaning of fear. She demanded to know what humanity truly was, how a species that appeared so primitive could wield technology that surpassed her own civilization by centuries. Price's response echoed through space as his fighter delivered the killing blow to the flagship. Humanity was the species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare against itself, then chosen cooperation over conflict when faced with external threats. They were the civilization that had turned paranoia into preparation into overwhelming victory, and isolation into the ultimate strategic advantage. The void renders exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up Earth's sky, taking with it the last hope of Zephyrian dominance and announcing to the galaxy that a new power had revealed itself among the stars. The silence that followed the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet was more profound than any sound Earth had ever known. Where moments before the sky had been filled with alien warships and the thunder of impossible weapons, now there was only the gentle drift of metallic debris catching sunlight as it fell toward the atmosphere in brilliant streaks. President William Hayes stood in the Oval Office and looked up at a sky that would never seem the same again. The stars that had once appeared distant and mysterious now held neighbors who finally understood that Earth was not a world waiting to be conquered. The age of humanity hiding behind a mask of primitive weakness had ended with the flash of an exploding dreadnought. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, now bearing the rank of major earned through actions that would be remembered for centuries, walked through underground facilities that were finally being revealed to a world ready to learn the truth. The masquerade was over, and humanity could finally show itself as it truly was. Not a fractured species stumbling toward civilization, but a unified force that had turned survival into science. Dr. Lisa Grant stood before the first public assembly of the Global Defense Council, addressing representatives from every nation on Earth who were learning for the first time what their governments had been secretly building for decades. The primitive infrastructure they had known was revealed as elaborate camouflage covering, technology that rivaled anything in known space. The quantum displacement networks that had seemed like subway systems were actually instant transportation corridors connecting every continent. The communication satellites that appeared to handle simple radio traffic were weapons platforms capable of precision strikes anywhere in the solar system. The weather monitoring stations were targeting systems for defenses that could protect Earth from any conceivable threat. Citizens across the globe watched in amazement as their leaders revealed the truth about human capabilities. The arguing governments they had observed were actually the most sophisticated decision-making system ever developed, allowing billions of minds to reach consensus through democratic processes that appeared chaotic to outside observers but produced coordination no hierarchy could match. Captain Danny Price stood on the bridge of the first openly advanced human starship, the Defiant Thunder, a vessel that incorporated quantum drive technology with weapon systems that could outfight anything in known space. The ship's existence had been hidden in orbital construction facilities disguised as space debris, built by workers who commuted through quantum tunnels from their homes on Earth. The navigator, a young officer who had grown up believing humanity was confined to one star system, asked for their destination with excitement that reflected the feelings of an entire species. For the first time in human history, the stars were not distant lights but accessible, destinations where Earth's children could walk as equals among any civilization they might encounter. Price smiled as he gave coordinates that would take them deep into what had been Zephyrian space. The aliens had wanted to see what fire looked like when Earth got serious. Now it was time to show the galaxy what happened when humanity stopped hiding and started exploring as the advanced civilization they had always been. The message that humanity broadcast to every star system within range of their transmitters was simple and clear. It went out on frequencies that penetrated faster than light communication networks, ensuring that every spacefaring civilization would receive it simultaneously, regardless of their distance from Earth. Admiral Kevin Walsh personally composed the transmission that would reshape galactic politics forever. Earth was not a primitive world awaiting conquest by more advanced civilizations. Humanity was not a helpless species struggling with basic technology, while more sophisticated neighbors watched from afar. The truth was far more dangerous for anyone who approached with hostile intentions. Humanity was 8 billion minds that had chosen cooperation over conquest, preparation over panic, and unity over the divisions that had once seemed to define them. For centuries they had watched the galaxy from their hidden fortress, learning from the mistakes of other civilizations, studying the weaknesses of potential enemies, and preparing for the day when contact became inevitable. The Zephyrian Empire had come to Earth, expecting easy prey, and found instead a species that had turned survival into the highest form of art. They had discovered what 17 previous alien civilizations had learned before them, that underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The transmission included tactical data from the battle that had just ended, showing Zephyrian ships being destroyed by weapons that their science could not explain, tactics that defied conventional military theory, and coordination that surpassed anything previously thought possible. It was both an introduction and a warning to any civilization that might consider following in the Empire's footsteps. Humanity did not seek to build an empire through conquest and domination. They had no desire to impose their will on other species or claim territory that belonged to others. But neither would they tolerate aggression against their world or their people. Any civilization that approached Earth with hostile intent would discover what centuries of human military development could accomplish when unified by a single purpose. Dr. Susan Carter's research teams began analyzing the wreckage of Zephyrian technology that now littered Earth's orbit, finding confirmation of theories that would revolutionize human understanding of physics. The aliens had possessed advanced technology but lacked the creativity to use it effectively. Their rigid thinking had made them predictable, and predictability was always fatal when facing human adaptability. Colonel Amy Brooks supervised the revelation of orbital facilities that had been hidden for decades, massive construction platforms where humanity had built ships and weapons that incorporated technologies from dozens of alien visitors who had underestimated Earth's defenses. Each defeat had taught humanity more about galactic civilization and how to survive among species that viewed conquest as natural law. The survivors of the Zephyrian fleet, scattered across the galaxy in damaged ships, carried news that would transform how every civilization viewed the small blue world in a distant arm of the galactic spiral. Earth was not an easy target for expansion, but a fortress defended by the most dangerous species ever encountered. Across known space, alien civilizations that had been planning their own visits to the primitive world quietly canceled their expeditions. The age of easy conquest was over, ended by a species that had learned to appear weak while growing strong, to seem divided while achieving perfect unity, and to hide advanced technology behind a facade of primitive simplicity. In the years that followed, human ships began appearing in star systems throughout the galaxy, their crews arriving not as conquerors but as equals ready to trade, explore, and learn. The species that had once hidden behind illusions of weakness now took their place among the stars as the civilization that had proven survival was the highest form of evolution. Children growing up on Earth would learn that their world was not just a pale blue dot lost in cosmic darkness, but a fortress, a beacon, and a promise that some things in the universe were not meant to be conquered. The stars belonged to everyone now, but Earth belonged to humanity, and humanity belonged among the stars as the species that had answered the universe with fire and forever changed what it meant to be human.